Hello fellow bike people, this time on Project Used Bikes, we're messing around with a really nice old Rocky Mountain Soul. So the story behind this bike is basically one of my regular customers. His name's not John, but we're going to call him John just for, respecting his privacy. John picked up a new bike. He picked up a specialized rock hopper, put some nice upgraded tires on it, a few other accessories here and there. That is a modern mountain bike. That's a cross-country setup. Hardtail, lightweight, very efficient pedaling position. It's a nice high-speed bike. This is basically the spiritual predecessor to that rock hopper that John just picked up. So, nice solid aluminum frame, which is actually in surprisingly good shape despite the age. This bike is, I'm guessing, from 2003, 4-ish, give or take. Maybe a little bit newer, but not by much. So, the frame is in amazing shape for its age. It's an older 3x9 drivetrain, so what used to be essentially the universal standard for mountain bikes, that has quite quickly been replaced with 1x10, 11, or 12, but this used to be the standard. Now this bike's been really heavily used. Not used hard, but a lot of use has gone into it. So it's needed a lot of maintenance and upgrades and part changes over the years. I've actually worked on this bike dozens of times myself, giving it its annual tune-up. So among other things, this one has upgraded tires, a slightly more modern rear derailleur, not really an upgrade, but a replacement front derailleur, upgrade to a newer Shimano bottom brackets, and other than that, it's pretty much all original. We've got the RockShox Sport there, we've got good Shimano V-brakes. So of course, this being Project Used Bikes, it is going to either Mississauga Cycles or the GLE movement. One of the two non-profit groups I'm working with, and it's going to go to somebody who really needs a good bike. The big beauty of one like this is it's a perfect one bike to do everything. Yes, it is a true mountain bike. You can set this up with some nice wide tires. They've even upgraded to disc brakes with the special disc mounts that are here. And then you can do some crazy off-roading with it. Or you can do some slightly skinnier tires, put a rack on it, maybe some baskets, use it as a nice lightweight urban commuter. Even if you wanted to do like a street freestyle thing with this, you could easily put a bit more rise on the handlebars, maybe slam the back end down, turn this into a wheelie bike with some nice wide slick tires. It has tons of potential. But what I really like about it is the bones of it are super strong, super reliable. Like Rocky Mountain is a great brand. They don't make cheap products, and they never have. So here's some close-ups of the bike. You can see the drivetrain. Those cogs, those are pretty dirty. They are grunged up. That cassette is somewhat new. I think that got replaced 3 or 4 years ago. And it's just exposure to all the salt that Southern Ontario uses that does this to drivetrains way ahead of their time. So I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to try and clean this cassette up, hope it works, but I may have to replace it. The derailleur itself, that spring is still nice and strong, so I'm not worried about the derailleur. Now the wheel, this is one of the bigger worries on the bike. There's some loose cones and some rattling, so the bearings in the hub there, those are loose. So I'm going to have to tighten that up, and I really hope everything is still intact and in good shape in there. So I'm hoping to save the wheel. But this, see that shimmy right there? That is not the rim. The rim is nice and true. That is the tire. Tires are made by essentially layer of rubber, layer of fabric, layer of rubber, layer of fabric, and then a really thick layer of rubber on top, which is your tread. If one of those layers of fabric inside tears, then it develops a shimmy or a warp, and that's what's happened here. So even though this tire is less than a year old, it's not usable anymore. I mean, you could ride it, but it wouldn't be pleasant. You'd feel the bike bumping around, so I'm obviously gonna have to change that. Moving up to the front end here, I'm pretty happy with it. The bearings in the headset are still buttery smooth. The bearings in the front wheel are pretty good. Those are nice and smooth as well. The brake pads are nice and thick. There's tons of life there. There's no scoring on the fork stanchion, so I'm hoping that's going to be nice and smooth as well. The only thing I don't really like about the front end is that super long stem and narrow handlebar. So I'm going to be putting something not high quality necessarily, but an alternative setup to that. So when I say not necessarily high quality components, I'm not working with brand new parts when I'm refurbishing these bikes. I'm working with parts that were donated, and parts that were on bikes that were donated, or parts that are directly from one of the groups that I'm working with. So the GLE movement, for example, in Malton, lots of people want to donate their bikes to them. So if the bike's not in great shape, I will work with it, fix it up, or take parts of it to use for another bike. Mississauga Cycles, they have a deal with Battleford Recycling Center. So every time there's scrap bikes there, they get to pick them up and use them for the non-profit work. Awesome. Now me, I'm at Cyclepath, and I get bikes donated here pretty frequently. This bike is honestly a little bit more high-end and modern than a lot of the ones that I get donated, so this is not really typical. Something like these back here, that's a lot more typical. It is bug steel frames, mid-range bikes from the 70s, 80s, 90s. They're still in good shape. They basically just need tires, maybe some handlebar tape, a cable here or there, and these are great. So really comfortable, really reliable, but not the world's most user-friendly compared to something like this. These are also typical of the bikes that are donated to me here. Actual department store bikes that are just in too good shape for me to be okay with throwing out. Because, I mean, really, I believe there's no such thing as a bad bike. Even the lowest end department store bike, you know, you get what you pay for out of them. The reason they're so cheap is because you're only intended to get so much use out of them. They're still, you know, appropriately priced for the value you get. So bikes like these probably would retail for just under or just over $100, depending on their age. And yeah, they're kind of heavy. They're not super fast bikes. You couldn't go racing with them, but they're still nice and reliable. They have a few heavy-duty parts here and there. And you know, when the original owner's done with them, if they donate them here, I fix them up, we find a good home for them, they never go to waste. So to fix this one up, I'm going to have to dig through the pile of used parts. Right now, what I'm going to show you is kind of some insider secrets. I'm going to show you the back of the shop and my little collection. So the first thing I want to say is it does not normally look like this. This is just a pile of random parts that have not been sorted yet. There are any number of reasons for that. That is partially me being lazy, and honestly, I could do a lot better than I am doing. Also partially because we're a bit short-staffed right now. Of the 3 mechanics that were here last year, one of them has gone to school, one of them is, you know, basically just waiting for a bigger career opportunity, and then there's me, who is, you know, me. So, these will be sorted out eventually. Before the season starts, I hope to get everything looking clean and actually professional and presentable. But for now, I've got piles of parts. So these are the ones I kind of pulled out already for that Rocky Mountain. Those are a period correct crank for the bike. Now realistically, if I'm not mistaken, it's only the middle chainring on the bike that's worn out, but I have the whole crank anyways, and this one looks cool, so I think I'm gonna put that on. As for pedals, I just have some basics. So, you know, plain plastic pedals, they'll pedal fine, but, you know, disposable essentially. Chain, 9-speed chain, lightly used, but that'll still work great. Handlebar and stem, slightly shorter stem. I think it's a Cannondale stem actually. And a bar with the oversized clamp. So that's going to give it a little bit more of a modern look and feel to the handlebar. And a saddle. So obviously those are just the parts I have at the moment. It's still winter, so I'm hoping to get a few more in and maybe put something better than those parts on the bike before I actually donate it. Alright, it is basically ready for a test ride now. In between finishing the assembly and filming this bit, I did a few adjustments on it, so I tightened up the cones on the wheels. The bearings are running fairly smooth, so it's good enough for a test ride. I am definitely going to have to open those up and repack the bearings properly before I donate this bike, but they're pretty good, definitely good enough to ride for now. The other thing was the brake cables. They were feeling a little sticky. So there's no fraying on them, and they're still nice and smooth. There's no calcification or oxidization or rust, basically. So they're okay. What I did is I took a little bit of Finish Line dry lube, so the really lightweight chain lube, put that in the gap here in the barrel adjuster, and inside the noodle here. Those brakes run buttery smooth now. Now I either gotta wait for some decent weather and ride it myself, or find somebody I can pressure into test riding it for me. Alright, it's been like a month since I filmed that first bit. I finally decided what we're gonna do with this. It's pretty much the same as I left it at the end of the last little filming session, but we've got some slightly slicker tires on here. We've nosed down the seat, put a shorter stem on, and we've left the bars because they're just the widest ones we have. If you've been watching my channel for a little while, you'll recognize this style of build. It's something me and Alex actually attempted last year or the year before with the DIY wheelie bike video. I'll see if I can put a link in the description for that one, because it was actually pretty cool. But I've kind of mimicked that build with this build. Reason for that is we got some new mechanics at Cyclepath, and they are all about wheelies. They are a way better wheelie than I will ever be, so I'm going to use Tony to give us some perspective on this. We're also going to take a look at Tony's bike to see what the difference is between an actual wheelie bike and something like this, where you can do wheelies, but it's technically a mountain bike. So this one's Tony's bike. This is a heavily customized Haro Sloride. Originally, this is a pretty standard big BMX build. So out of the factory, it would have had V brakes, would have been single speed, would have had a little bit more traditional handlebar on there, a little bit slimmer tires, but other than that, same spirit of the build. This one has been modified with some nice big tires, installing a gear set and a disc brake, which should not be possible on a frame like this, and some bigger bars from SE. So this is the gear setup. Now this frame is spaced for single speed, so it is a certain width. This wheel is built for a 7-speed setup, so it's much wider. I've had to mess with the spacing in there so that we can fit everything, and it just barely fits. This is the kind of thing where if it was a customer's bike, I wouldn't think that's reliable enough to, give out or charge money for. But bike mechanics are just like automotive mechanics. We ride sketchy bikes because we can. If something goes wrong, we know how to fix it. So having experimental setups like this with the attached dropout there for the gears and the add-on disc brake mount there for that's pretty cool for a bike mechanic. So let me introduce Tony. Honestly, I kind of hope he ends up being on this channel a lot more because, let's be honest, my BMX riding is not the most impressive it's ever been. I've crippled myself too much. So this isn't your first bike. What did you start on for wheeling?
Wheeling, I started on a GT Aggressor comp.
Okay, so GT Aggressor, that's actually pretty similar to the Rocky Mountain that we're working on. So 26-inch wheels, V brakes, no 27. Okay, so it was like a newer one.
Yeah. With
cool.
Disc brakes. Like this one.
Nice. And other than the fact that these obviously look so much better, what made you want to switch from that to a proper wheelie bike?
I went to a Rideout and I seen a bunch of nice wheelie bikes, and I wanted something with pegs because I never worked at a bike shop before, so I never really knew much. I didn't know you can switch your axle to one. If that was the case, I would have gone a bigger mountain bike with pegs. But I do prefer a big BMX more.
I'm not super knowledgeable about the geometry and the ergonomics of these compared to the 20-inch wheeled models that I ride, but just looking at it, the silhouette is really similar, and it's kind of why I've sold my mountain bike. I only own BMX bikes now because it's all I have fun riding, and I imagine this is going to give that same kind of experience where it's, you pedal and it just responds instantly. It's punchy. It's not going to feel sloppy when you're trying to turn. It's just a more enjoyable style of bike, I'm imagining, right? So, sounds like a decent conclusion. You can wheelie basically any bike, but you're just getting so much more, not just the looks, but the actual ride quality of the bike on a true wheelie bike is just so much better than on a mountain bike. So now I kind of want to go outside and get some clips of these bikes being ridden. It's cold, but hey, it's sunny, so good enough. I want to see what differences I see, you know? I have a theory that the geometry on this bike is going to let it be wheelied much faster and much smoother. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you see mountain bikers wheeling, they're generally going a lot slower and they're in a lot lighter gear than anyone riding a proper wheelie bike. I don't really know for sure why that is. I'm assuming it has to do with geometry, ergonomics, and gear ratios. But hey, let's go find out. Oh, it's too cold. Oh yes, back in the bike shop where it's warm. Okay, I knew there was going to be a difference. I did not realize how much of a difference there was going to be. I started going into this video with the intention of saying, yeah, you don't need a serious wheelie bike, you can just get a regular mountain bike and modify it a little, but no, turns out that's not the case. So, just riding that thing felt like a normal mountain bike, which I've ridden hundreds of bikes like that. I mean, probably like 2 or 3 a day when it comes to test rides, because really this is the bread and butter style of bike here at Cyclepath. I'd never ridden a real wheelie bike before, so that was a very eye-opening experience. It, just like the 20-inch BMX bikes, feels super responsive, it's super punchy, it's a ton of fun, and honestly, it doesn't feel heavy. With a bike that's built for single speed and 29er wheels, I was expecting kind of a heavy, dull feeling to it, but no, it's alive, it's bouncy, it's a really, really good setup. Now, it was super cold out there, so I don't know if my hands were shaking or if I got good footage, but if you can see near the end of the footage where we're riding this bike instead of the Haro, that tire was going nearly flat. Just squeeze. That's definitely a slow leak in that tube, or one of us hit something while we were riding and didn't notice, but I'm thinking that's just an old tube with a slow leak. That was definitely not helping. But these skinny tires, that's not giving you much protection. So if we did hit something, that's another downside to this style of bike, is these tires, way less protection than a big tire like we have on that Haro. Other than that, the V-brakes, don't get me wrong, they give you good amounts of power. A V-brake is plenty to make a wheel skid. It's the modulation. It's the fact that you don't have that instant response from one finger on the brake lever. You can't control it as easily. So you've got much less ability to, tap the brake to bring the front end down a little, but not all the way down when you're wheeling. And I mean, my last real complaint about it, it's just the wrong geometry. You saw Tony riding the bike, and it looks small. And this is a pretty big bike. Like, this is a size adults, medium, or large. So that's roughly like a 17 or 18 inch frame. but it just it looked so small, and for wheeling it feels small. With that type of riding, you want something a lot wider, taller, gives you more space to move yourself around. With this bike, you're kind of hunched in a tiny position like that. It just doesn't work. Well, it kind of does. So I would recommend a bike like this for, a first bike for getting into wheelie riding, but definitely don't plan on staying on this style of bike forever. Now, the reason I do suggest this, despite the fact it does have some obvious flaws, is these are accessible. Even now during the bike shortage, you can get one of these used for 150 bucks kind of thing. Might not be a Rocky Mountain, might be a GT, might be a Specialized, a Trek, a Norco, anything like that. But they're affordable. They're an easy way to get into the sport. And realistically, they're fairly reliable bikes, so even if you don't use it for wheeling, just put actual mountain bike tires on it and go ride some trails. Bikes like this, totally useful. Just not perfect for certain styles of riding.